guys? The Bench Buddies are back. And yes, we're on our week 15 of the college basketball rankings, top 25. We have some teams entering and some teams dropping out, with a lot of new teams, even entering our others receiving votes, because it's just been that crazy of a week last week. But before we get into the video, make sure you hit that like button, hit the subscribe button as well, as you'll be entered into our 100 subscriber giveaway. It'll be an autographed player item. But we're not going too much in detail on that. You'll just have to see it once we get there. But before we get into our rankings, we'll go from the teams that dropped from the rankings. Marquette with a tough week this week. And, St. Mary's obviously had to play Gonzaga, so that was a guaranteed loss there. But they did go into the others receiving votes. But Ty, out of the other four teams, what other team entices you here?
I mean, you got to start with Alabama, obviously, because they can beat any team in the country when they're on, and they can lose to about 150 teams or even more when they're off. So they're just, crazy in both directions. So you always got to start with them. Boise State is a team nobody is talking about, and I have not watched once all year. But if you look at bracketology and their record, they just keep winning and they keep moving up. So they're a team to watch out for.
And speaking of Boise State, the Mountain West is actually putting some pretty good teams out there. Colorado State, here they are. They were ranked a few times in our rankings before. And now we got to show love to Notre Dame. We're finally putting them up here. I think they are a legit team this year, tied or half game back of the conference lead. Duke has it right now. And, Notre Dame, I think no one really saw this coming from them, especially after what they did last year and how miserable that was. But props to them, for even being up here. And if they keep playing this way, no doubt in my mind, they'll be a tournament team. And we're going to start here at 25. Coming into the rankings, we got Arkansas, obviously, because, you go in and beat the number one team in the country on your home floor. And then how do you respond with a 1-point loss at Alabama? But before that, they had won their last 9 games. But, 9 out of the last 10 is pretty good for considering where this team was, that, 9-5 before that huge run. And I think JD Notae, that he's definitely going to be a player to watch come March Madness. If something happens, obviously they should make the tournament. But if he has some great games, I think this team could make a, surprise Sweet 16 run. We saw it last year and how good the Arkansas team was. And, I think they're kind of primed for another run just like that.
All right, Xavier comes in at number 24. Just like they've done, it seems like many weeks in a row at this point. They go 1-1, and this week it's looking like another 1-1 week. It just kind of comes down to shooting with this team. They kind of live and die by the three, and you saw in the UConn game they were hitting and kind of pulled away at the end in that game. But it's hard to see them going too much higher than where they are right now. I don't see them going much higher than a 6th seed in March, and they'll be susceptible to being upset in the first round, in my opinion.
23rd, we got the UConn Huskies, who just lost that Xavier team at their place. But they get them again this week at home, and another game at home against Seton Hall. And, this team, they got healthy, but then now they're 2-3 since they've been fully healthy. So, the chemistry, I think they're trying to regain that as well. But if they can rip off 2 here, I think they'll be in prime position for potentially making a late push for the Big East title. Depending on how Providence plays these last few weeks. But give props to UConn, because at the beginning of the year, we thought this team was going to be a legit team, beating Auburn in that triple OT game. And since then, the team has kind of slowly went downhill. I mean, they're still a really good team, but I think they just kind of are coming down from that, run that they had. But UConn, give them props for being up here at 23rd in the country.
All right, Wyoming makes their first appearance in the rankings with 2 more wins here in the Mountain West, and they're 21-3 in a really underrated conference. I think right now they have 3 or 4 bids, according to Lenardi. So strong conference, and if you're 21-3 in that conference, then you deserve to be ranked. They just keep on winning. They had a couple big wins 2 weeks ago. This week they just took care of business against inferior teams. Should be 2 more wins this week, and they should be 23-3. And you got to keep them on your watch because they just keep on winning, and they're a dangerous team.
21st, we got the Ohio State Buckeyes. Tough loss at Rutgers, and then they respond by going into the rival school, Michigan, and pretty much not destroying them, but really kind of taking advantage in the last 10 minutes of poor shooting by Michigan. They didn't really pull away. Michigan kind of lost the game themselves, but obviously a win's a win, and especially in Big Ten play on the road, you need every win that you can get. And I think you can thank EJ Liddell. I mean, he's pretty much took this team under his wing this year, and he's been the only consistent piece that they've had every single game. And they have a pretty easy schedule until they play Michigan and Michigan State in the last week. So this team, could be prized for a Big Ten championship if they can win all six of those, before they have their two hardest games still left on the schedule. But 15-6 right now, this Ohio State Buckeyes team is looking like a 4 seed to anywhere to a 6 seed, depending on outcomes of games. But hopefully, for all them Buckeye fans out there, they don't have a repeat of what happened last year.
All right, Texas goes up to 20. Pretty good week for them, all things considered. You get Kansas and then at Baylor. I think they would have been happy with 1-1 going into it, and that's what they are coming out of it. So another tough week now at Oklahoma, Texas Tech. Possibly 1-1, and they'd be happy with that again. That's just how the Big 12 goes this year. You get tough games every night for the most part. But they've kind of struggled their way up until this point, up until the Kansas win. They were playing a little below where we had their expectations, but their schedule's looking like they could have a strong finish. They have a lot of quad one opportunities here coming up where they can establish themselves. So don't give up on them yet.
At 19th, we got the Michigan State Spartans. Yeah, I don't even know what to talk about on this team because it's super inconsistent. And as you can see on the bottom here, 5-4 in their last 9 games. And before those 9 games, they were 13-2, and we were thinking, okay, this state team is going to be a really good team. And I think they just kind of hit a wall in the Big Ten play, playing some tough teams. Obviously, the conference is super competitive this year, but I think they're going to look back and reflect on that huge loss at Rutgers. And I don't think it's going to be the same team moving forward because right now, they got another easy game at Penn State and then home against Illinois, and Kofi might come in there and dominate. It's a Michigan State problem within, or if just nobody has really been a superstar this year with Michigan State, because so far they really don't have a star, and they need a star leader to step up come March if this team really wants to make a run, because you can't rely on hopefully this guy can, have a good game. But you need a guy that's guaranteed to have a good game for sure.
All right, Tennessee jumping up to 18, a team that's kind of been between 15 and 20 most of the year, but they've really turned it on. They've won 7 of their last 8, and that was coming off that almost 30-point loss to Kentucky when a lot of people just wrote them off. But now they have another chance to prove that they are still at the top of the SEC. They have some tough games coming up. This week you got Kentucky at home and at Arkansas, and similar to Texas, I think 1-1 would be a good week and keep them about at 18. But if they can get that Kentucky win and right their wrong of the huge loss, I think they're going to be a real contender in March and someone that people aren't really talking about.
17th, we got the Wisconsin Badgers. Big win last week at Michigan State. Huge win for them. And then how do they respond with a very weird and ugly loss against Rutgers? Kind of unexpected, but give that Rutgers team some credit. They've ripped off, I think, 3 AP wins in a row, a team that is really on their last life before those 3 wins. And this week at Indiana versus Michigan, 2 games that, not saying they need to win, but it would definitely help their case, especially in the Big Ten seeding wise and for the resume for March Madness. We're getting to the stage where 1-1 is really looking like a good week, especially with all these great teams right around the same record. But moving forward, this Wisconsin team, it's all Johnny Davis or nothing. And if there's a guy in March Madness that matches up well with Johnny Davis, a good guard that can play defense and score the same, I might go with the other team just because of how Wisconsin is and how much they evolve around Johnny Davis. But if they can figure out to get other key pieces involved, this Wisconsin team could be very dangerous in March.
All right, big jump from Murray State here up to 16. They're 24-2, so they just continue to win ugly. A lot of people would say 2, not exactly convincing wins this week, but they're road conference wins. Teams like this, the mid-major teams, they typically don't blow out teams in their conference, but once they get into March, they can compete with anyone really. So Murray State is no exception. They're still a team to watch out for. I know people are going to write them off because they're not winning by 30 points against their conference opponents. But as long as they keep winning, you got to watch out for them. I think they're going to be scary, and no one's going to want to face them in the first round.
At 15th, we got the Illinois fighting Illini. And I think in all respect, they deserve to be here at 15. You know, going on the road at Purdue in Mackey is a tough place to play. Obviously, they lost that game, but they responded yesterday with a, I believe, 7-point win over Northwestern at home. And now they get to go on the road again for two tough places to play. But I think Kofi Coburn is going to be, you know, the difference in both of these games. Neither team has a guy that can match up well with him. And if he can stay out of foul trouble, I think Illinois can really win both of these games this week. And they do have a half game lead right now in the Big Ten. So ripping off these two wins here could establish a bigger lead if we're talking about this team next week.
All right, UCLA with a slight drop down to 14, losing at USC, a team who is really, playing below where they were ranked. That's not a loss UCLA could really afford. Not a terrible loss, but when you look at their previous week going 0-2, that was really a game they needed to win, especially if they want to win the Pac-12. So they can bounce back this week with two pretty easy games against the Washington schools, both at home. So one of the easier schedules remaining. They've already played Arizona twice. They've already played USC once. So they should be able to rise their ranking going into the Pac-12 tournament. But they got to get stuff figured out because they're 1-3 in their last four.
And at 13th, we got the Villanova Wildcats moving up one. Some very questionable wins for this Villanova team. They're slowly getting by. And, you can see at the bottom, lots of close games this month of February. And I think that only helps them come March because in March, it's win in advance. That's all that matters. But right now we're talking about how close the games are. They're winning. And are they really a good team? But we're going to see tomorrow night when they play at Providence, pretty much the game of the Big East right now. And whatever they do get a cupcake game at home against Georgetown. So it easily could be a 2-0 week for them if they go on the road and get a huge win. But if they lose, I think they're 1-1 at worst. I don't think they can lose to Georgetown there. If this team can stay healthy, what's his name? Gillespie. Yeah, Colin Gillespie. If he can stay healthy, because he had a bad ankle injury. I think he rolled his ankle last week. If he can stay healthy, this Villanova team, they really can play as a top 10 team, but we just really haven't seen that as of late. And they're just once I said, they're just doing enough just to get by.
All right, Texas Tech falls to 12 with their loss at Oklahoma. And, that's not a terrible loss to have, although they did kind of get dominated in that game. If you go into Oklahoma and lose by 5, no one's really going to say anything. But when you go in there and lose by, I think it was 17, that's going to raise some eyebrows, especially when you have Baylor and Texas this week, which is, kind of a gauntlet coming up for Texas Tech. But this team has gone through really every gauntlet you could possibly go through. Non-conference, they played Tennessee and Gonzaga. In conference, they've already played Kansas twice. They played Texas. I think they've went to Baylor already. And they're coming out at 19-6 and, still improving, it seems like, every week. The big win over TCU is something people will overlook, but that's a good win against a tournament team. So if they can get through this week, they'll continue to rise, and I think they should be a top 4 seed for sure in March.
At 11, we got the USC Trojans. If we're going to talk about the Pacific game, they really should have lost that game. A team in the West Coast Conference that has no business beating a Pac-12 team. Doesn't matter which Pac-12 team this year. And they won by 6. The score may be a little misleading. Oh, they won. They won by 2 possessions. But it was a tie game, I think, with like 5 minutes left to go, I believe. It was a pretty close game. Escaped that, and then they almost gave UCLA a win. They were up 6 with, I think, less than 5 seconds to go. UCLA hit a 3, and USC pretty much threw the ball in bounds right to UCLA, and Tiger Campbell missed a game-tying 3 to send it to OT. But, hey, once again, they're finding ways to win, and that's all that matters. And you can thank Drew Peterson for the big game against UCLA. He really stepped up when it mattered most. Now they get both Washington schools this week. I expect 2 wins here, and really kind of the unsung team that no one's really still talking about. They could be 23-4 heading into their last few weeks in conference play.
All right, Houston with a drop after an 0-2 week, and they hadn't lost actually since they lost Marcus Sasser. So it really didn't seem like a big loss. But now this week, the home loss to Memphis is a head scratcher because obviously it's February. Memphis was in their typical slide late in the season, players quitting. At least that's what people were saying. And they come into your place and they won by double digits. So how will Houston respond this week? This is one of the tougher weeks coming up for the American Conference. That's about as tough as it'll get. UCF and Wichita State. The Sasser injury, now we got to start asking that question again after they lose 2 games in a row. They were dominant. I had them in my own top 5. Now I'm not really sure where I stand on this team, so they need 2 wins to bounce back.
At 9, we got the Kansas Jayhawks, a very questionable and weird loss at Texas. I mean, it was a great game, but just from Kansas and what we've seen this year, other than that Kentucky game, I mean, they've been in every single game they've played in and really made it competitive. But how do you respond with a 1-1 week? Hopefully with a 2-0 week. I don't really see too many problems this week. Oklahoma State and West Virginia, middle tier teams, could give you a slip up game, but I don't see that happening. And I know we're going to talk about Ochai Agbaji. We all know how good he is this year, but I think Juwan Harris Jr. is the guy for Kansas that's really kept this team together. He's been the glue for this team. And, I don't know why Abaji's getting all the attention because it's a whole team thing, but I just think he's the bigger name. But some of the smaller guys are really keeping this Kansas team afloat because, I mean, I think it's just the bench depth that's really been getting Kansas going, getting everyone involved. And once again, it always comes down to bench depth for March and you're making runs. And that's why I think this Kansas team could be a scary out in March Madness because they could, put a whole new 5 in, and I think they could get the same production out of those guys as the starters. So if you're looking for a team to rely on heavily in March Madness, I would say as of right now, Kansas would be that team, especially they will be along the 2-3 seed line right now. And if you're looking for not a one seed to really make a run, I think this Kansas team is that team.
All right, Baylor with a good bounce back week this week. Not the toughest of games, but you get a road win in the Big 12, which is never easy, and then Texas coming off the Kansas win. They get through both of those, so good bounce back from them. They're starting to get healthy, and then Chama Chachua gets hurt. So tough break for them as he's now out for the year. And now you go to Texas Tech this week. TCU is going to be no easy game, but it's just a huge blow for Baylor because they had been so injured for 2 or 3 weeks. They finally got healthy. They got Flagler back, and then you lose your star center for the year. So that's a tough blow. And that wasn't a position where they had a ton of depth. So we'll see how they can bounce back from that going forward. But I don't know if you can look at them quite the same as the national championship contender that we thought they were, but they're still a great team.
At 7, we got the Duke Blue Devils sliding a little bit after a very tough home loss against Virginia. The corner 3 that went in, if that doesn't happen, I think this team could be number 1, possibly number 2. Just if, what we've seen this last week happen, but they lost. And I think that Wake Forest game is going to be a trap game tomorrow night. They could lose that game. Wake Forest is a team in the ACC that's not getting enough credit, just like Notre Dame. And a win there, I think for sure they're ranked next week, Wake Forest. I don't know. Duke, it's been very inconsistent, but 21-4, they're right where they're supposed to be. We're along the 2 seed line, and once again, poised for a title run.
All right, Kentucky jumps to number 6 with 2 pretty easy wins this week against 2 inferior teams. Now you get at Tennessee, which will be a very tough game. They're playing a lot better. In Alabama, you never know what you're going to get from them. So that can always be a tough game. They could blow them out by 30. Who knows? But it's not going to be an easy week. But they've won, I think it was 7 of their 8 and the 7 of their last 8. And the one loss was to Auburn. So ever since that Tennessee game where we really our attention to Kentucky when they blew them out, ever since then, they've just looked like a top 5 team. I think they're a top 2 team. But that's just my opinion. But going forward, I think they are the best team in the SEC, and the conference runs through them. You got to watch out for Sheboy, potential National Player of the Year.
At 5, we got my Providence Friars. The AP poll finally showed them some love this week, ranking them inside the top 10. But here we're going top 5 for the Friars, and it was a very sketchy and ugly win at home against DePaul. Scraped that one out. But hey, a win's a win, and when other teams fall and you guys win and you don't lose, you got to move up. We're going to talk about the biggest game that Providence will have all year. And luckily, they get the home game first, and you win this game. Essentially, the Big East is yours. It's wrapped up. They have a commanding, I think it is a 3-game lead, I believe, right now, or it could be 2.5. I'm not sure, but it's Villanova in second place, and if you beat them, and even split with them this year, I think you have a really good shot at winning the Big East, winning Zach some money, which would be great. But if you can look at the bottom there, they're 14-0 at home, which is a very enticing number if you're betting the stats for tomorrow's game. And they're 9-0 in games decided by 5 points or less, which is a very good stat to have, especially with March Madness and the Big East tournament right around the corner. So expect some close games. And obviously Providence knows how to play good in close games. And I think that's just a little edge that they have and something you want to know heading into bracket season.
All right, we got Purdue here at number 4. And you want to talk about sketchy. This team dominated Illinois. Really good team. Ran them off the court. And then, they get their doors blown off by Michigan, who was still not even in the field. So that's not a good loss. And then yesterday, they came back, pulled it out against Maryland. But the first 30 minutes of that game, they just, I don't know what was going on. It looked like they were sleepwalking. Win's a win. I'll give them that. They came back. They got the win despite some questionable officiating at the end. They got out of there with the win. Now you get Northwestern and Rutgers, so they should win both of those. It says down here, and it's true, Shaky wins the last few weeks, so it's not just this week. They got to get themselves figured out, and they just look like a team that could lose in the first weekend or they could win the whole thing. They're just a little inconsistent right now. But if they can play with more consistency, they can definitely make a long run in March.
At 3, we got the Arizona Wildcats going 3-0 last week, all on the road. It's always tough to win on the road, especially in conference. So give them props, and give them props for being 22-2 right now. Nobody saw this coming. I mean, Tommy Lloyd coming over from Gonzaga after 20-something years, first year as a head coach, and pretty much picking up right where he left off, especially with that Gonzaga team. Great record, winning huge games, and they're 12-1 in the Pac-12, and at UCLA was their only loss. And that's not even an ugly loss, as they're ranked 12th we had them. I think we got to go with Arizona here being a underrated 1-seed favorite right now. It seems like we don't give them enough credit. You and me are talking about it's the easier side because Arizona is the 1 seed last week in the bracketology. Somehow, some way, they keep finding ways to win, keep proving us wrong. And I honestly wouldn't be surprised if this team makes a Final Four run. And we're finally going to start giving them some credit here.
All right, Auburn with a drop to number 2. We've had them 1 for a while, but tough loss at Arkansas. A well-played game and not a terrible loss. It was a good team they were playing, and then they came back home and dominated A&M. Kind of silenced all the questions for a while. Should easily beat Vanderbilt, obviously, but if they can go into Florida, who really needs that win for a bid, and they can go out of there with a win, I think that really just silences all the doubts surrounding this team right now. They already have people saying they're overrated. They shouldn't have been number 1, and they lost 1 game. People forget they're 23-2. They've looked, dominant outside of 3 or 4 games this year. So we still have them at number 2. That's where they deserve to be. And if they can go 2-0 this week, they might find themselves back at number 1. Who knows?
And at 1, of course, we got everyone's favorite Gonzaga Bulldogs. It seems like they're here, top 5 for the last decade almost, because they play nobody in their conference that's good, and they're out of conference schedule, which this year has been really good compared to years in the past. And that's why they have those 2 losses. But yet again, if you look at the bottom there, that first bullet, average conference game win by 30 or more points. So that's what their competition is for guaranteed 20 games. Congratulations. You're playing nobodies. And of course, with 4 games left in their conference, I mean, they're going to win the conference. I think if they win at Pepperdine, it's theirs already with 3 games to go. But of course, they are the most deserving team of the 1 seed. They've won, I think it's been 15 in a row, 16 in a row, something like that. Ever since they started playing conference games, they've won them all, obviously. But Chet Holmgren, obviously, we know he's a great player, potential top pick. Gonzaga finding ways to win, and let's see if this is the year where they're finally gonna take it home. But that is going to be it for our video today. If you liked it, hit the like button, comment if you think, our rankings are a little different than yours. But make sure you hit that subscribe button as well, as we're giving away that autograph at 100 subscribers, so you don't want to miss that. But until the next time, the Bench Buddies are out.
She never called back.